You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, manager extraordinaire and my personal attorney, Mr. Devin Sturgis. Welcome to the show, Devin. I'm here with my buddy Zane Paisley, Drew Skills, and my super pal, Mr. Will Huckabee, the NWA Continental Champion. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, everybody. How are you tonight?
Fantastic.
Always are, right, Q?
You know that, brother. It's a choice.
Sorry about that.
Let me ask you a question.
Yep.
Let's get started with it, Devin. Where, when, and why did you get into the wrestling business?
So, what's funny is I had a bunch of near misses, if you want to call that, where I, looking back, could have gotten involved countless different ways, but just never realized how or where or, what it was all about. So I ended up, back in the late 90s, my dad was a school teacher, and when you're a school teacher, you work about 12 other jobs, and one of those was running a bar at an Elks Lodge in Manassas, Virginia. He calls me up because he told my brother and I, hey, come on over tonight. There's a wrestling show tonight, and I think it's ECW because they, of course, it was an independent show, and they had Steve Carino, and sure. I think Simon Diamond was on the show, but he didn't know independence from anything. So we went over there, and at the time I was working for Hyatt at the hotel banquet department, and the company was having a horrendous time with their setup and everything else. So I drove out to the hotel, got a bunch of AV equipment, probably would have gotten fired for, and helped them build their set and all that kind of fun stuff, and just met all the folks, Shorty Smalls, who of course and they were like, wow, you're really into it, like, we have a training school, why don't you come check us out? And that's just how it rolled. I went out to their school, loved it, and trained with Shorty Smalls and a few of the other guys, and that's all she wrote, man.
One of my first proteges, Shorty, graduated the same class as Joey Mercury and Christian York.
Yeah, and had a privilege of being a manager. You don't wrestle too many matches, but was lucky enough to have a match with both of those guys as well.
Beautiful. Yeah, when I trained Shorty, we trained a couple guys to be managers, and one of them did very well. And I had him in there in gear and taking the bumps and learning the matches and everything else, just like the boys did, because it's only going to benefit you later on in your career. And, it's great to be able to take a bump and not kill yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and, you don't have to do it day in and day out, so you may not be as, smooth as the boys and whatnot. But if you don't know what you're doing, if nothing else, you don't understand why you're doing it. And I tell you what, over the decade plus years I was, actively taking shows, I've never met so many managers that had scoliosis of the back and can't bump. Good God. So Q, I don't know if in some of the ranting you've heard the fifth ring post, but that was one of my gems that I came up with up north. Just so many of the, predominantly female managers that just stood out there like they needed to help hold the ring up. So
yep, I agree.
Yeah, I refuse to be one of those,
You and I have ranted back and forth before many times, always on the same page about the business and things like that. And, it's funny that I can tell you that I've seen a lot of your work, and, it's amazing to me, you know how to manage and I know how to manage, but it's amazing to me how many people out there don't understand conceptually where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be a cheerleader, when you're supposed to be quiet, when you're supposed to turn to the crowd, and when you're not. They don't understand any of that stuff. They end up stealing half the heat from the guy or switching the heat to them, and they can't carry it the whole match, so then it dies completely. But it's really, if you watch the guys out there, there's some guys that have been out there a while too. They don't have the first clue, do they?
No, and and to flip it a little bit, I've managed some guys, some of the wrestlers too, that the wrestlers have to know how to take the heat back.
Sure.
I can give it all day long, but if you're not going to take it, so there's been times where I've been accused of stealing heat, and I just, I don't know what else I could have done there, guys. But, I'll tell you, I had 2 experiences in my life, and you know me, I don't name drop, so these are just more for reference points because it'll tell you the era of the wrestlers that I got to manage that just taught me everything you just said. And the first was really, really early on, when I was working a show for Travis Bradshaw up in the Newport News area, and he had me manage Greg Valentine. And I mean, basically, I shook the guy's hand. When I got there, he was kind of off on his own, not being rude or anything. He just, he was.
That's Greg. That's Greg.
Yeah, it's just, he was getting into his thing. And we went out there and we did the match. And it was, you talk about a guy that obviously has a long history of working with a manager. I just put myself where I thought he might need me at whatever time. And if he wanted to use me, he did. If not, great. And it looked very smooth because obviously he knows what he's doing. And like I said, I was still really green, so I was just trying to be in the right spot. And then much, much later on the tail end of things, I got to manage, a guy that you know really well, Tracy Smothers, for a few matches. And, he asked me what I like to do, and I kind of laughed. I said, I'm a manager, like whatever you need me to do. Like I don't have spots, and, it was the same kind of thing where he just would flash me a look, and there I was, and I knew what he wanted without any sort of communication. And it's a lost art that so many managers don't know how to do, and I think it's because they don't study. They don't, they think it's all the flash and the character and talking on the mic, and there's so much more to it. If you don't understand why the match is the way it is, then you're not going to be in that position.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I had the benefit of I never really had aspirations of being a manager. I have a couple times in the past, but I got to work with Jim Cornette. I got to work with Harvey Whippleman. I know him as Downtown Bruno from back in the day, but those guys will give you an education in how to manage and be places. And when Omega I wrestled the first 3 Omega shows. And then I said, I really want to do something behind the scenes because, I knew how good Shane was. And of course, obviously he's doing almost 3 different jobs at TNA right now. But, I wanted to, every time I would go out there, I would ask Matt and Shane, where do you think I should be? What should I do? And, I managed the Kagis against Matt and got a lot of tips from that. But, I went on and I studied every manager. I studied Jimmy Hart, and I said, nope, I'm not going to be like Jimmy Hart. And then I studied Captain Lou Albano, and I said, I really like him. Then I found like Gary Hart, and I said, I think I can pull that little gimmick off a little bit. And somewhere between Gary Hart and JJ is the way I tried to position myself. Dress nice, look good. But for me, because I had been managed so much over the years by so many guys, and it's like Drew Skills will vouch for this as you will, is when you have a bad referee, you really learn to appreciate good referees.
Most definitely.
And when you have a bad manager who is never in position, who's running around the ring 100 miles an hour constantly, yelling at the crowd during your match when you're trying to get some heat on people, and he doesn't stop, you just want to strangle him, man. So, I didn't want any part of that. I wanted to try to learn from these guys. And I probably, when Omega said, hey, we want you to manage Mickey Gambino and C.W. Anderson, I was like, all right, I need to really do some studying. So I probably seriously watched, I'm a freak with learning stuff. So I probably watched 100 hours of wrestling, just matches with managers who were successful to pull it off. So, and I think some guys haven't watched 1 hour of it that are out there managing people.
Well, and honestly, I think at some point every wrestler should manage at least 1 or 2 matches just to get that view of it. I think it changes the psychology a little bit for you, when you're having to affect things without being directly involved, and sort of the softer side of the match. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that as much managing as you're doing now, it probably changes the view that you have when you're wrestling a match.
Oh, absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. It's, you gotta be, you, as a wrestler, you have to think one step ahead. As a manager, you have to think at least one step ahead too. And that's the difference. I think a lot of guys go out there and, if they and this is, I think guys that have never wrestled and always managed, they don't understand staying one step ahead. You're doing one thing, but you're thinking about what you're doing next at the same time. And if you're calling it in the ring, you're trying to make it make sense. And when you're out there around the ring, you got to think, what am I going to be doing next? And where's this play into the match? And how does it add to the psychology of the match and telling the story and the heel getting over? And, I don't want to get over as a heel. It's not my job. My job is to help get the heel over. So it's really sort of a fine art out there. And well, listen, I got my buddy William Huckabee on the line. And he's our co-host, always from 10 to 11. Sometimes he joins us earlier. You want to fire away some questions at our buddy Devin Sturgis?
Oh, of course. I think because I remember you, Mr. Sturgis, when I first got into the business here in North Carolina and stuff. And I think you were doing a lot of stuff for the Virginia companies, GXW, like you said, Travis Bradshaw, Mark Anthony, and all of them. And I was really impressed. I was really impressed by, not only your work rate, but also your actual character, your gimmick and stuff. How did you progress with your gimmick and finally get to the end product that I've seen, about 6-7 years ago?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, so, when you're green as hell and you're training, your trainers usually give you your first gimmick. So, I had just bought a Harley Davidson. I was, running a stable, managing a stable with, folks like Shorty Smalls that had kind of a biker look. So that was where the Sturgis name came in, and I, just did that sort of thing. And it turned very quickly into, me having sort of a managerial feud with Alexis Lurie, Mickey James, back then Alexis Lurie. And, it just seemed to really capture a lot of heat to go after the women. So that's where I added the Extreme TNA portion to it. All the talent, twice the achievement, because what else would TNA stand for? And then it kind of led from there. I was trying to get a little more outrageous, a little more flashy. We did I was getting a lot of flack from crowds that, I was too out of shape and fat to get in the ring to wrestle. So I switched my look around to, the Ric Flair-esque robe and boots, and talking about when I wrestled Hulk Hogan in WrestleMania 2 and, all this other crazy cockamamie stuff. And the outrageous stuff seemed to really kind of hit off, where I was able to help produce heat and feed it off without really drawing too much attention, believe it or not. And then, it was actually, it was during some seminars, which I recommend to anybody listening. If you have a good seminar with some good instructors, like the ones Q puts on, I would definitely go. But it was with, Steve Carino and, Simon Diamond, and they said, you need to do something that nobody's doing, if you really want to have a chance of getting anywhere. That was where kind of collectively we came up with a pimp gimmick, but not like what we'd seen on TV. We didn't want it to be that funny girl on each arm, because how are you going to be a heel when you have good looking girls, with you? And so on Simon's advice, I got a whole bunch of Dolomite videos, the old 70s TV show. And I studied that. I got there's a movie on American Pimps. I watched, it was like a documentary on real pimps. And, none of those guys are funny. I mean, they are, but they don't mean to be. Right. And that's what I studied.
Did you study Huggy Bear from Beretta?
I did, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Antonio Vargas.
So here's the funniest thing. You'll like this. So I was at a chiller convention up north one year, and I was full gimmick, at the table and everything, and decided to walk around. And I didn't realize that Dolomite was actually there, and had a table downstairs from where I was. So I'm walking around, and a couple of my buddies knew he was there, so they kind of just, rid me in that, and bumped me right into his table, and the guy turned me around, made me get down on one knee, took out one of his wooden canes, knighted me in front of everybody with the cane, handed me the cane, said, "Now you're pimped." And
oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, that's the wood cane I use from then on. But but that's what, so that's where I ended up. Some people didn't get it because they wanted me to be the silly guy, or, put me with, wrestlers that were doing like gay characters because they thought that would be funny. And it really was not the point. Because I thought that I would get the wrong kind of heat if I was doing sort of that silly, goofy pimp. I didn't want to be another tough guy, so it was good to be that tough when your back's turned, chicken shit when you're facing me kind of thing. But it was that kind of, smart mouth hopping around kind of pimp. And, it worked. I had to learn to walk in 5-inch platforms with goldfish in them, but it worked. It was a lot of fun too, I gotta say.
So you had to learn what every city girl had to learn.
That's right. Exactly right. I don't know about the goldfish. Do they have goldfish in their shoes? I don't know.
I don't think so.
Oh, that was. I stopped those. I came down on a bump and they broke open. There was like water everywhere. Oh, and so that was the end of those. Sorry, go ahead.
Save the fish.
Yeah.
Now, Devin, I was going to ask you, as a manager and stuff, and like you kind of alluded to earlier, you've managed a lot of people, a lot of names, and a lot of indie guys and stuff. What is your opinion about, the lack of staples in today's current product? When you have a manager who manages several guys who might not have a lot of stuff in common besides the fact that they all have the same manager and stuff.
Yeah, so part of I'm assuming you're talking on the the big show. Part of the problem on the indie shows is that if you're a good manager, if you're being given a name to manage, it's a gift from the promoter. And if you don't think that way, then get out of wrestling. As a manager, you're not being given a name to manage. You're just not, other than as a thank you. You're getting put with the new guys, the guys that need mouthpieces, the guys that need help. If they should get lost around the ring, you're there to help. You're there to be, some seniority to folks that might need it. So it's tougher to have, I would say, a stable on the independent level, unless it's a stable of guys that fit that mold, maybe like one vet and some younger folks, and have it work where the manager is really holding it together in the way that I think you're talking about, where you have almost like a Heenan family kind of thing going on. As far as like on TV and the big shows, I think, if they can't even really put together tag team divisions to be really cohesive, that sort of old school tag team mentality that we used to see, I can't see them doing a stable. But yeah, it's something that I think is missing. I think that a manager, if used correctly, would add a lot. I think, just to use a specific example from WWE, I think John Cena would have a whole different reaction if he had a Bobby Heenan. To kind of spar off of. And, so yeah, it's a good point. I think it's very much missing. I just don't know if they're in the right mindset to bring that back.
All right, last question. I'm sorry, go ahead, Q.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, last question, and I think I asked Joel Gertner this. With Paul Heyman and Dutch Mantel and a couple of other people, do you think that we're slowly starting to see the resurgence of the manager? Because I know here in North Carolina we're starting to see, managers popping up. Of course, you have Q-Ball, then you have Nick D and a couple of other guys. Do you think that we're slowly starting to see not only WWE but the independent circuit pick up on the necessity of having a manager as an integral part of the match, and not only the match but the show? Okay,
so not to be I know I sound sort of skeptical about things, but there's two big types of managers, right? There's the managers that get it, and there's the managers that don't. And on the independent level, there's always going to be a huge number of managers that don't, because you're going to get brothers of the promoter and this and that and girlfriends and whatever else out there, quote unquote, managing. So I'm not including any of those. I think having somebody like Q-Ball manage helps tremendously boost the role of the manager, because obviously he gets it, right? And he's being very humble in that he's learning a new aspect of it, but come on, he could do it in his sleep. So I think having more people like that manage is a big help. As far as it being a resurgence, I think that we're, as a wrestling family, always kind of had this feud internally of the old school mentality of things and the way things are being done now, and people wanting to be like WWE, and, you know, this sort of back and forth. And I think until we figure out how to merge those two thoughts together, a lot of the truly old school components, like the managers of the stables and real tag teams, are not going to be as prevalent as they need to be. I just don't think that it's been common enough that people have figured out how to merge those two things together. But it's getting there slowly. I think groups like Omega help a lot. I think the folks that run Omega get it, obviously. I think Q-Ball gets it. You know, I'm sure there's other promotions that are, you know, similar to that. I'm in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. AML's being very successful. I've been able to check out some of their shows. I think they get it. So, yeah. I'm
about to say, Devin, if you get a chance, I'm about to say, because you're in Winston-Salem and stuff, you get a chance, you know, check out the PWX show. My good buddy Tommy Thomas works at PWX and stuff, man. And I feel like he's one of the hottest managers right now as far as young and upcoming talent. As far as managers go, he really gets it. Knows when to get heat, knows when to shut up, you know, and he's always constantly asking for critiques and stuff like that. So I'd really like for you to watch him and stuff and come back on the show and tell us what you think about him.
Yeah, if you want, get him in touch with me. I live on Facebook, so I'm always happy to watch and critique and give my opinion. That's for sure.
I always appreciate. I was telling the guys earlier. I was saying, you know, and Kevin already knew it, but I said, yeah, he's really smart. And you know, I don't throw that acronym around to a lot of people because I hear people tell me they get it all the time, and then I watch their match and understand that they really don't get it. And there's nothing worse in wrestling than somebody that thinks they get it, but really doesn't. It's the absolute albatross of the business. It's full of them. Oh, I get it. Really? I just watched your last two matches, and I can tell you one thing. You don't get it. So, you know, it's a rant I got coming up. I'll make sure I tag you in it about people that don't get it, but think they do. But, you know, the manager aspect is, I mean, some parts of it is bombastic and some parts are so subtle. And knowing the difference is when you're, you know, raving or screaming, clapping, or, you know, I'm so big that I go to a corner and I go down on a knee. So the only thing up, my head's behind the ring post so that I'm not blocking any fans from seeing the match, you know, and I stick within 2 feet of that corner unless I've got a spot to do. And that's what I was taught by Downtown Bruno, Harvey Whippleman. He said, Q, you anchor yourself to that corner. You go 2-3 feet one way, 2-3 feet the other way, unless you've got a job to do somewhere on the other side and you move to that side before it's time to do it, not after or during. But, you know, little subtleties like that are just on with a lot of the managers that I see out there today. Go ahead.
So I was saying, you know, God forbid that it's being filmed and they have to understand how to work the cameras. Oh,
listen, most guys, right? You know, I tell my guys in training, every training session, hard cam's here. I move the hard cam all the time, and I always make them work to the hard cam. And sometimes I'm where the hard cam is, and sometimes it's on the opposite side of me. So they make sure they got it. You know, and managers with cameras, they're even more clueless than wrestlers are. You don't know how many wrestlers I've seen. And thank God that in the heyday, I did 3 different TV shows out of Pittsburgh and 2 out of North Carolina and 1 out of Maryland. And I got a lot of TV time, and I understand, you know, how to work the camera and how to position a guy who doesn't know how to work the camera, either as a manager or as the other guy in the ring with him. But, you know, managers do one of 2 things. They hog the camera or they forget it's there. There seems to be no in between.
No, right. And, if you can position yourself opposite the hard cam so that it just catches you when it needs, when you need it to. I mean, that's what people don't understand. So, I've seen people go to the side, adjacent to the hard cam and they'll never be on anything.
You don't even know they're there. They're the invisible manager.
Right. All of a sudden they pop up on the ring, and they're, grabbing somebody. Whoa, what are they?
Who's that guy? Yeah. Is that somebody from the audience?
Yeah. So I always joke. So this has always been my thing, and I haven't ran in on this, but I probably should. But I always used to be able to tell and read somebody by the way they came into the locker room, how they approached the ring, how they got in the ring, and how they got out of the ring. And I didn't even have to see their match to figure out how much they got it just off of those 4 things. Because even folks that, have some skill in the ring, if they don't get it, they blow one of those 4 things or all 4 of those.
I agree with you 100%. You need to rant that, man. That's a good rant.
Yeah, I probably should. I mean, cause I know we don't have a whole lot of time, so I'll tell you this. So and I think there's different schools of thought on this, but, I absolutely cannot stand, and I hate when I watch really old matches of myself that I was involved in, that I did this. I call it the indie circle of shame. You come out as a heel and you walk around the ring and you yell at everybody, and then you get in. Why would you put yourself so close to the common people?
Yeah, you become one of them instead of the show.
And so, like you said, a lot of times, and I'm not being a wrestler, but I'm still physically bigger than a lot of the folks I wrestled, managed. I had to hide myself from, blocking views and all that kind of stuff too. And, it's much easier to do that if you just haven't paced yourself around the whole outside of the ring. First of all, nobody needs an entrance that long.
Right.
You don't need to hear your music play for 2.5 minutes, while you walk around and yell at people. And that shouldn't be where you get your heat, honestly, like one of the things that I thought my favorite compliment that I received, and I thought that, okay, maybe I'm starting to figure this wrestling thing out, was that I got people pissed off by the look on my face when I came through the curtain.
Absolutely.
And, the shit-eating grin and,
the look that says I'm better than you.
That's it. And, and so here's the little funny part that you'll appreciate, Q. That look was practiced for hours in the mirror. The second I first saw it on Bobby Heenan, I said, I got to make that look on my face when I come out. And I sat in the mirror and I practiced it. I practiced my promos in the mirror. I practiced my facial expressions in the mirror. I imagined matches in my head and did, my facial expressions in reaction to things. And if you're not doing that as a manager, you really should. I mean, how else are you going to get those softer things down
you're exactly right. And as a wrestler, like on my shows, I don't allow anybody to do anything but go straight to the ring. I never have. You don't parade around there. If you're on Broadway, you go up on stage. You're the actor. You don't go mill around with the people in the seats for 5 minutes before you go up there, because then you become one of them. And there's no event. There's no show. There's no star. It's just another dude. And of course, a lot of guys are so small these days that it exposes the business too. So my guys are allowed to go in the ring. Their music plays for no more than 1 minute. They go in the ring. They're not allowed to get on a mic, and they get over with the wrestling. And if you can't get over the wrestling, if you're a heel, if you can't get heat with your wrestling, I'm not talking about raking somebody's eyes. I'm talking about actually wrestling. If you can't get your heat with that, you probably don't belong in the business. And it's the same thing, I was taught you got 2 feet from the time you come through the curtain. And that first 2 feet, those people have to decide if they love you or they hate you, and that look, that scowl, that look around like you can't believe what you're seeing, that little shake of the head immediately tells them you're better than them. You can't stand to be around them. You're only there because you're getting paid. Just little things like that. But Drew Skills, you see it with guys that don't managers and wrestlers are like that. Don't know how to properly come through that curtain, and people know within 2 or 3 feet who and what they are.
Right. It's getting that character over immediately from the moment you walk through the curtain.
And that's what I was taught. I was told if they don't know in 2 feet, then you're never going to get over. And, Bob talked about it. Bob Holly, we had him on here earlier, Devin. I don't think you caught any of it, but great guest. And he talked a lot about getting over. When I was raised in wrestling, and we're going back, 30 something years, but especially in Hawaii, I was raised that the only thing that matters, it's not your wrestling skill, it's not your size. The only thing that matters is getting over and figuring out what those 1 or 2 things that you do that are consistent and good that will get you over, and stick with those 2 or 3 things to get over. And it's the same thing with managers. I mean, they think they got to get on a mic, and let's face it, most indie shows, the microphone sucks anyway. All you hear is blah, 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 blah. It sounds like, somebody that can't talk trying to auction off cattle. So
I hated getting on the mic.
You know what? I just, at Omega, they like me to introduce CW, so I do it. But otherwise, I don't need the mic. If I can't get heated as a manager by my actions, then I probably shouldn't even be managing. So,
well, I want to make this one point too is, people talk about nowadays that the wrestling fans, and you and I talk about this all the time, Q, that they have shorter attention spans. They like the flashy high spots, the big boos. That's what gets over, blah, 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 blah. If that's true, then why can you watch, and these fans can watch, a very solid, well done, old school style Iron Man match, and they would be emotionally drained at the end of it and fully invested in the match, because that stuff works. Okay. And a manager, and I'm not saying in the Iron Man match, but as far as a manager goes, you can do your quick little spots and you think that that's what's going to get you over. Yeah. You pop a wrestler, or you pull hair, or you do something, and you think that's what's getting you your heat. That's wrong. That's the spot that causes them to react louder to you at that moment. But what's really getting you over is all the stuff that you've done to build that up to that point, and all the way you interact, the way you walk, all the things we've been talking about. You have every match you go out there as a manager is your 60-man Iron Man match, and it's the slow burn, it's the build up, it's all of those things, and whatever spots you're lucky enough to be given in a match, if you are given a spot, doesn't do it. It's not it. It's not what pops. It's not what pops them.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
and absolutely.
It's the same thing to me, and that was the way I've always approached it.
And one of the things that Bruno taught me years ago is he said in the match, have the guy in a position to be fed to you once, and sneak over right before you get to him, look at the crowd and tell him to shush. And there's actually a picture on my page of me doing that. Almost get to him and have the ref turn around. Then the second time you get a little closer, almost get your hands around him, ref turns around. Finally, the third time you get him, and by then the crowd goes bird shit. But the big mistake you can make is getting him the first time. You should get almost caught trying to get him, because it builds up anticipation. And that's one of the things that the guys go out and do all these high spots in the match, never build anticipation. They're giving away everything that would be anticipated at the beginning and not at the end where it should be. And it's the same with management. There has to be some anticipation. But listen, I don't want to keep you all night, man. It was great talking to you. We got to get you on it. We got to get you on again. Drew or Morningstar, you got any closing questions for my buddy Devin Sturgis?
No, I'm good.
Beautiful. Devin, thanks for being on the show, man.
Thanks,
we appreciate it. We like to feature an indie guy, and you were a tremendous follow-up and a great contrast to Bob Holly. So thanks for coming on.
Great. Thank you, guys.
All right. You listen to the Undisputed Wrestling Show at AngryMarks.com. Join us every Tuesday night from 9 o'clock p.m. to 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where Drew Skills, the Morningstar William Huckabee, the Bearded Wonder Zane Paisley, and I, Q-Ball Carmichael, are snapping necks and cashing checks. We'll catch you next week, fans.
Yeah.